Do it, Sharice.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our mixed panel AMA. Beth Toland is here with us, and we're going to talk about building great things and building great experiences through understanding. We're just going to start kicking it off right away. But before we get going, I want to walk through a few housekeeping agendas. So if you have any questions, we'll be looking at the Q&A function in the Zoom. And this webinar is going to be recorded. So hold tight and you'll get the recording via email in the next few days. And if you have any technical difficulties, you're automatically muted, your camera's off when you join. But if you have any trouble hearing, make sure to check your audio settings. You can also watch the webinar on your computer and connect via phone if you have any trouble with hearing audio. So to introduce Beth, Beth Toland is the head of experience research at Asana. She's an expert in making data-informed decisions with a background in design. She works really closely with product partners to develop the vision and to drive roadmap strategy. And she has her BA and MFA from Virginia Commonwealth University. And maybe we'll get into this and test it a little bit later, but her secret talent is that she knows lyrics to every popular song from the 70s and 80s.
True fact. Hi, thanks for having me, Sharice.
We're so excited that you're here. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now. And to just kick us off, can you tell us a little bit about your team and give us a purview into what it's like to work at Asana?
Yeah, sure thing. So Asana is in the work tracking space. So we help teams orchestrate all their work, like their daily tasks and workflows and things like that. So my team, the experience research team, is focused on understanding the dynamics of like how modern work is happening, the role that technology plays because we're in the technology space, and then how we can help teams thrive in those environments because it can be really tricky and complex. So understanding all those dynamics is what we do, and not just how Asana fits into that world, but like outside of Asana, how does work happen? And then how can Asana help those people?
Awesome.
What it's like to work at Asana is pretty special. I've been there for almost 7 years, and it's a very interesting and special culture. There's a lot of independence. We work on the AOR system, and so there's a lot of responsibility that we're given, and that's one of the things that kind of keeps me going is that there's great trust in your area of expertise. That just lets you shine and do your very best work. So that's like one of the greatest things for us as a researcher, because it can be a little bit hard to get people to buy in. This is not a problem that we've had at Asana.
How did you first get started in research, and what motivates you to stay in research right now?
So I started out, I think you saw my intro slide, I started out as a designer. That's what I went to school for. And then I got into information architecture, but generally the way I got into research is the apprentice model. So I did not go to school for information architecture or school for any kind of like social psychology. I kind of learned on the job. But I've done so many different things in the world of product and tech. I feel like it's given me a lot of really great experience. So I fully support that apprentice model of coming into your own career. I think one of the things that always surprises people is that I did start out as an information architect, but before that I was in museum studies. And in the way I got into information architecture is I thought, well, if I can help people navigate around a space that's a museum, like why can't I just do that in like the virtual world? So I pitched that worked, and so that was my foray into this world. And then I happened to work at a company that we had just acquired eLab, which is like kind of an early behavioral research company, and that's sort of where I learned that balance of like thinking strategically and tactically, like both are very important. And I think I just talked about what motivates me to keep going is that, especially at Asana, like the power that knowledge holds, the ability for researchers to influence the product and strategy and direction is tremendous. And so that we get to be able to be a part of those decisions and learning and facilitate that knowledge is just exciting all the time.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So kind of moving into the research side and what it, kind of like how that process works for you, how do you start selecting participants for your research?
Well, that depends on the questions that we have or the problem that we're trying to solve. Generally speaking, our domain area is the knowledge worker. So that we start there, and that's not everybody's space, but that's, we at least we can start with that formed area. And then from there, a couple things, again, like it's about the questions that you have and that kind of thing, but we also have broken our customer out into 5 behavioral segments. And so we can kind of align who our target is based on those segments as well. So we kind of use a few different mechanisms, but the big thing is like, what problem are you trying to solve? And then we'll go try and find those folks.
Yeah, those behavioral segments, can you share one or two of them?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the contributor. They are one of our most important ones. Why I say that is because early on in the Asana world, we had this way of thinking about our customer, which was sort of like the champion and then everybody else. And so as we've dug in and gotten to know our customer a little bit more and the people that we're trying to serve, this contributor person has really been become more and more important for us, because we're not just serving one person. It's not just the champion and everyone else. We all know that we work in teams, we work in groups of people, and we have to have those people who are like really contributing to the work and not just leading the work. And so making sure that we're delivering value to them is super important. And I think we've just sort of had the scales lifted from our eyes in the past few years of like how important that particular segment is.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So how do you go about finding decision makers to make sure that they're a part of the research? And if you have any advice on specifically getting decision makers to use your platform in order to get their feedback in the research?
Yeah, so I think if I understand this, your question, it's maybe you're working on a product or tool or experience and you want the decision makers to use that thing to get a feel for what it really feels like. That is a problem that I do not have. In fact, we have the opposite challenge, is that we are power users of our own tool. And so getting them to use other kinds of things that make work a little bit harder, that's sort of my challenge. But I have been in this spot before. And there are a couple things that can be done. You can host like user days. And have, like a whole day where everyone has to work, on your particular tool. Or you could take a stream of work. Maybe there's like one stream that you have that could be put into your tool or your product, and have people work through that for the month or the quarter. That's probably a little bit more, that's easier than maybe say if you're working in healthcare and people have to like choose their particular health plan or something like that, and they're not, so those things might. But I think having things like customer days, setting up, we call them Lucy stands, where you can sit like at your cafe or your lunch table, not now anymore, but that's what we used to do, and have like walk up stands. So people will walk up and be like, hey, what are you selling here? And you're like, you go through this flow and show me how it works. So I think especially for decision makers, and if they're executives, like having a short amount of time, very time box kind of thing, that at least you can start to get them the feel for it, is a good start anyway.
Yeah. Do you ever, I know you mentioned you have some sort of like days or workshops where you bring people in, but do you ever find yourself having a hard time getting customer response rates or customers to participate in your research?
Mm-hmm. We do. Those contributors that I talked about, they don't always want to talk to us. And so we have to find ways to incentivize them or incentivize other people So like leveraging relationships. So the people who do talk to us, we say, hey, do you know any people that, sound like this or feel like this? If you can find those people and they'll talk to us, we'll give you a thing. So kind of doing that snowballing type of recruiting, but that's a difficult one. And I think that happens for a lot of people, right? Like it's like the customer you actually really desperately need to talk to and they don't want to talk to you. But
Yeah.
getting creative about how you incentivize them. And I don't just mean pay, because that for sure is one thing. But there are other ways that you can incentivize them and have them feel like they really are contributing to the changes that you're making to the product and you really, really do care.
Yeah, that makes sense. Contributors being the most important, but the trickiest to hone
Yeah,
into.
totally.
So along this thread of working with participants and gathering research, what are some of the key things, if you were to categorize them, that you learn from your users?
So this is so hard because I'm one of those people that I'm just like, you don't even have to have a reason, just go start talking to people and you'll learn something new. Um, I guess the biggest category I might say is the unexpected. Like you can learn things you didn't even know to ask. And I think if you, and this feels, it's been very challenging, is like, even if you don't have a project to anchor on, even if you don't have a question, you could still talk to customers and understand their day and get a sense for what their life is like. Because if you do that, you're gonna find problems that they didn't even know that they didn't name.
Yeah.
Almost if they can name the problem, it's like pretty late in the game, then you're just fixing something, right? But if you can authentically identify, like, gosh, that person sounds like they're really having a hard time, but they're just like, well, it's just what you got to do. You're like, what if you didn't just have to do that? What if we could change how you thought about things? What if? Yeah, and so those unexpected moments, I think, are the ones that are really the reason that you want to talk to customers. And that goes kind of like when I was mentioning earlier about there's like this the strategic and the tactical, right? There's like that's the kind of like high level, like, gosh, you couldn't name this problem, but we can name it and we can fix it for you. To the tactical is like, how did we do? We thought we fixed a problem. Did we do it? How well did we do it? And so those are, I think, the kind of the things that you can learn.
Yeah, that makes sense. At Mixpanel, we have this culture of QBQ. It means question behind the question. And it's
Yeah.
something that our PMs and our support team really drives in on, where it's not about the question. It's about what's the context behind it? Can you give me more detail? Maybe you want the specific feature, but I think you actually just want to solve the specific problem.
Yeah.
We ended up naming our community after it because it's just, you come to Mixpanel and you learn what QBQ means.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that concept. That is so important to like really get under the root.
Right, right. Trying to drive to the key point. So thinking about working about others and collaborating, how do you collaborate with fellow researchers, program teams, stakeholders to produce the best results?
Yeah, and I do think that collaboration like yields the best results. So at Asana, our team has a set of values, like what we value in UXR, and one of our values is to be generous collaborators. And so that means, err on the side of more, not fewer in your debriefs. Bring people in early and often. You know, embracing the questions and the debate that happen along the way as you are collecting your data, talking to people. It'll just make your work stronger. If you avoid it and wait for the big reveal at the end, you might find that someone had a really great line of questions that you could have asked, or a different way of approaching something, but it's late in the game and you can't revisit it. And if you bring those people in earlier, you can get the benefit of their wisdom and their knowledge and their questioning. We have stakeholder maps that will make like, okay, at the very center, these people have to be at all the things all the time. Then you've kind of got your radiating set of people who can and should be involved in the work. But I would say in those moments of being collaborative or bringing people in, like, don't get defensive. Like, if you are the first person to ask questions, if you are the the person who's open and humble, like, you will disarm people and you will be the expert in the lead there, instead of kind of always being like on the back foot. So like, lean in hard. And so debriefs and those kinds of things, I think, are how we do it at Asana, is like early and often. Debrief after every session, like for 5 minutes. What did you all hear? Mid debrief, and debrief. By the time you get at the end, most people are like, yep, that makes sense, I'm with you. Instead of, again, like I said, sort of like the big reveal.
Yeah, early, often, lots of questions.
Lots of questions. The other thing that I often hear about is like, how do you get people to come to your debriefs, or those kind of things. And I would say there, to answer my own question, make those collaborations really exceptional. Like, we spent a lot of time in I guess maybe the first couple of years at Asana, making every interaction that you have with UXR like super efficient, incredibly productive, and also fun. So when people left a meeting with our team, they were like, wow, I just learned something. And then they would tell people, and I'm not exaggerating, that's how it went. It was like, you got to go to one of those UXR meetings. Are they having a meeting? Can I get in it? Like, that kind of thing. So then when you do have something to say, when you are trying to get people to participate, like, they want to be there because you've proven yourself.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, it sounds like a great experience too. We just got a follow-up question in the chat asking if you ever involve Asana colleagues from other departments in your research. So I guess this kind of goes into, you have your team, but bringing more people in. Are there specific departments you maybe work closely with?
Yeah, so we are kind of embedded. So the researchers are aligned to the programs. So like we have the researcher who is working on 2 or 3 programs at a time. And those programs all have designer, PMs, and engineering. So by default, we're already working with those people, and PMMs as well. So product marketing managers, engineers. So everybody, we're already starting off very collaboratively. I'm trying to think if there are any, and customer success is another team that we leverage a lot as proxies for customers, to get their perspective. So we work a lot with CS too. We have a really great relationship with CS and sales. I think those are our main. That's kind of everybody, but
yeah, you're kind of getting it from all angles there.
Yeah.
Okay, to dig into this exceptional experience at your debrief, someone just asked, what makes them exceptional? Is it that learning component, or do you have a secret sauce there?
The secret sauce is make them efficient, productive, and fun. Those are the ingredients to it. Like, so that people leave with feeling like they got something and that they learned something out of it. And if you can be an incredible facilitator on top of it. The other cool thing about being able to do that is that they'll look to you or your team to be a facilitator, even if it's not in, for your particular meeting. I think that that's a really great thing, because then you can continue to build your relationships in the company. You can build skill set, become a mentor in facilitation. And honestly, the way I think about our role is as facilitators of knowledge and insight. We're not the ones who go and get it. We're all responsible for understanding our customers. So it's just a matter of us facilitating how that works. But like, very tactically, I mean, like, on time, have an agenda, like, know how great facilitation works, like, teach them something they didn't know. And that's kind of easy. I mean, for me, when I say the first 2 years, that was pretty easy because I was the first researcher there. It's like, I was telling them all kinds of stuff. But, that's kind of our job as researchers, is to help people have a new understanding. And if you can get them out of that in the first few meetings, like, you're gold.
Yeah, That makes sense. So when you're working with your research team and you're collecting feedback, are you working with both customers and your colleagues since they're also power users? What's that that balance?
Totally, yeah. So we work with customers, non-customers, people who have churned, people who are new. So we talk to the range of people, but we also talk to internal folks. We use Asana like very few people use Asana, but everything goes through dog fooding. So internally we try everything. But we have to have a perspective on those on the feedback that we get there. And that can be a challenge because we also very much believe in our product, and we believe that it does make work better and makes you more efficient and things like that. And so it can be sometimes a little bit of a challenge to get people out of the mindset of like, but they should be using it this way. This is the way that we should use it, or that it shouldn't be used that way. And so having that tension to be like, yeah, I agree in many ways. However, we have to meet people where they are. And right now, here's what they are and what is our growth path. And we've had some stumbles there where we over-indexed on internal feedback and had to pull back. But by and large, we try and keep that in check.
Yeah, that's a good call out. And when you're trying to get feedback from relatively siloed teams to collaborate, do you have a special approach there?
I think though, I would say the same kind of answer that I gave before about collaborating, like bringing people in, having great meetings, having great output. I'll give you a couple other ways on top of that one. Is another reason to have these great meetings and to be generous collaborators is because if people are siloed, you can take ownership of breaking those down. Like you can say, you know what, you come to my meeting. I want you there. Like other people, you have these other types of meetings, but for us, we want everybody there. It can mean bigger meetings, right? It can mean have bigger debriefs, which means you do have to be really great facilitators. But like, I think that's a great thing.
Yeah.
Not if you have to drive to a decision. It's not for every single thing, but for things like
Right.
debriefs and learnings, we had a really great. I guess it was maybe we would do this every Friday for a month because we had this kind of really big initiative and question that we were going for. And we made these debriefs super public. Like we put them in this kind of like thoroughfare. And we had a great big, everybody's familiar with these great big like foam core boards. And we put up, all of our questions. And we had kind of a biggish team. And then as people were kind of walking by, they'd be like, what is that? And they would stay and stand. And so we kind of broke down barriers that way too. And the facilitator, the researcher was like, oh, Pete, I'm glad you're here, and like would bring them in and make them feel welcome. And so creating that environment and being like super open is, I think, another way to kind of break silos down.
Yeah, both mental and physical barriers.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you mentioned that you even bring the product marketing teams in. How can user experiences be leveraged by those product marketing teams when they're building their go-to-market strategy?
Totally. So I think partnership, like start early as a partner, define those questions together. Like have it be less, if your environment is like this, don't let it be a handoff. We have our PMMs as part of that core team for any program area. So they're right there at the very beginning. They come to the sessions for research. And if they're in lockstep with you, hopefully they want to be. And it might be just a matter of them not realizing like, oh gosh, I didn't think I could, or that you wanted me there. So hopefully they have an attitude of wanting to participate, because if they are, then they're gonna like really understand the problem space. They won't have a scoped understanding, and then what they create will be, way more meaningful and authentic. So, I say bring them along way up front. Just get them involved, and then you can learn from what they're learning too. You know, if they're like, the way I think about the two roles is that UXR might, like the qualitative space, can help understand, you know, what the problem is, what the pain is, and how deeply it's felt. Mm-hmm. PMM can help us understand how far-reaching that pain is, and, you know, even what the value of that pain is. So they can say, like, that sounds really painful to a very tiny amount of people and not exactly our target. And then we're like, okay, we can either talk about that or be like, we get it. So like, let's have a conversation about it. But that's how I kind of think about the two roles together. And so of course you need that in order to make sure that you've got, you're developing the right product and the right messaging for it.
Yeah, back to being open, keep the conversations going early, often, bring everyone to the table.
Collaboration win.
Yeah, seems to be a main theme here. So thinking away from collaboration and more just your team, I'm sure you get so many requests. So how do you prioritize or balance your team's development and allowing them to hone into their craft while also making sure that work gets done?
Yeah, tricky balance. So we are like just now actually putting together a fully integrated kind of project plan. So across all the researchers and all the programs, so that we kind of have this one view. So, you know, if the projects that we're working on are customer value and business impact, and then the third kind of leg of that stool is where I think that we as qualitative researchers are uniquely qualified to help. I think those will give us the most meaningful projects. By default, the work that you do will have huge impact, right? Because you're working on the hardest problems. Things that are a bit more evaluative or tactical, we're helping to arm our other team members to be able to do that with just coaching and not actually having us lead that work, because I don't think that that's where we're necessarily, at least in our environment, uniquely qualified. Like getting those questions behind the questions and helping folks figure out what is the right approach and then making sense of it. Those feel very particular to our role, and where I want to keep us. So further up the double diamond, answering those bigger kind of questions. And that's the conversation that we have when we prioritize. We're like, is this the biggest question? Is this the thing that you think only we can answer? Is this the biggest area of focus for you? Like, is this the highest impact that you can have? Those could be tough questions sometimes, right? Because it might cause a bit more reflection than people are ready for. But like, that's how we're trying to strike that balance. You know, sometimes we get out of step because we're trying to help and we don't like to say no. And I'm not saying it's perfect, but like, those are the things that we're striving for.
Yeah, you really hit the nail on my next question, which was around prioritization. And so, you know, I think it's a hard problem to solve when you have so many people and you want to help. And it sounds like you're trying to prioritize the projects that your team is best suited for, things that really speak to what you're trying to solve. Is there anything else there when it comes to prioritizing projects, or, you know, say you're strapped for resources? How do you go about saying yes or no?
So I think that there's a range. It doesn't always have to be a full yes and a full no. Like there's a spectrum that we can be involved in. And I think looking at where the skill is in the researcher and the skill is in the rest of the team, that we might be able to bridge that gap. Maybe you've got a designer who is super comfortable and great at doing research. Like let's collaborate and lean into that and figure out where we can leverage their skills. Yeah. So I think first having the attitude of like, hey, it doesn't have to always be a hard yes and no. Like, what do we got? What's the question that we have? And, you know, I think this is also a time that you might think about other, looking at the range of questions that you have. You might be able to ladder them up. You might be able to kind of, you know, answer a few of the questions or get at a few of the things that people are asking in one project. It may not be the project that they thought that they were asking for, but if you can dig into it and be like, you know what, I can answer most of your questions with what I'm already doing. Just sort of matrixing the work a bit more is another way to leverage. And then practically speaking, don't be afraid to sometimes cherry pick some of the questions, do tag on testing, and figure out where you can answer some of these questions that are floating out there with other programs or projects in what you're doing. Don't be afraid to break it up, I guess I would say.
Yeah. And collaboration comes at us
Collaboration!
again. Yeah. So, we've gone through what your workflows are like, what your team is like, and how to work with others, prioritizing your projects. When it comes time to present your results, what's your methodology there? Do you do anything company-wide to share the work that you're doing or the impact of user experience research of your team?
Yeah. So when it comes to presenting, at least for now, we're of the whatever makes sense mode. I think that will, we still need templates, so that there's some consistency and that we've got quality and things like that. But we want to make sure that the information that we are sharing is at the right altitude and answering the right questions. So sometimes that might just mean like a really quick annotation of a thing, or it might mean something way bigger, like a roadshow or something like that. So, it just depends on the level of the project or the scale of the project. For sure, I think if I'm reflecting on some of our most recent broader work, it goes to the kind of program area. So the researchers will share there. And remember, from the past conversation, they're probably already on board because that they've been into all these sessions. And so, and then there are some leadership meetings that we might take it to say, hey, this is how we're thinking about some frameworks around our product. You will see other people who are going to leverage this framework and make decisions based on this framework. So get familiar with it. And so the researcher will present there. And then something that we have been doing the last couple years is having at the, I guess, twice a year, as we're thinking about road mapping and planning and all these kinds of things, we'll synthesize what we feel like are maybe our top 5-ish themes, and share them company-wide. So it's a little bit easier now because it's Zoom and then kind of everyone's forced to do it. But that's what we did last time. We were like, hey, you're thinking about your second half of the year. These are the things that you really should be focused on and thinking about when you're thinking about how you're going to plan your roadmap or how you're going to execute on your roadmap. I think those are the ones that have been most successful. We also have things called show and tell that like all the teams will get up and say, here's what I'm working on, here's what I've accomplished. And so the researcher who is embedded there might have something to say.
Yeah, so talking more about synthesizing that material, that makes sense from our team to the broader company. How does your team take the information that they're getting through their research and bring it down into these bite-sized pieces that they can then work with and then share?
So a couple things. We have a meeting. It's like a team meeting. We call it the T3 meeting, but it's the threads, themes, and truths. So it's like the bud of an idea. When that idea starts to kind of germinate and feel like, gosh, this is becoming a little bit of a pattern, then it becomes a theme, and then we might promote it to a truth. Those conversations, those meetings that we have, I don't know, I think we have them something every 6 weeks or so, where the entire team gets together and we start to make sense of the individual project and researchers' insights. And then we notice, do we have patterns? Like, are there things that we can start to ladder up? And then how can we then narrow in? And so that's kind of a process. And that's what we did. We had these meetings and then we said, okay, we think these are the biggest pieces, the biggest insights. And the researchers are generally responsible for that. Like, hey, I think these are big ones. And also, to be clear, it's not a platform for every researcher to show what their great work was. That happens
Yeah.
throughout like all the year. This is for like, no, like across the board, these are our biggest things. And then we have basically crits or workshops to say like, let's focus and narrow so we can get it to these pieces. That's for that process. But we also have another thing that we do called like basically snacks that we send out. I think probably everybody does something like this, but it's like, hey, here's a nugget. Keep it in mind. It's an interesting thing. Maybe it's a story from one of our sessions, or an insight from one of the projects that one of the researchers did that hasn't been widely socialized, but it's worth noting. We'll share that in like a very pithy kind of like short, snack size.
Yeah, it almost comes back to the early and often approach that you have, where it doesn't have to be this huge rollout at the end, but here's something to think about along the way.
Totally, yeah.
Well, we have time for one more question. And before we do that, I wanted to remind everyone that's here watching with us that there's a survey that's going to be coming out. Sam is going to drop it into the chat. So, of course, we're always trying to be data-driven and data-informed. So please take the time to fill out the survey and give us feedback on the session today. And with that, Beth, I'm going to ask you, do you have any advice for someone that's interested in getting into a career in experience research?
Yeah. There are lots of opportunities out there now for learning. There are a lot of volunteer opportunities for doing like work within your community for research. And those are great ways to kind of learn a practical application. So maybe you're coming from education and you just need to transition your the academic learnings into the kind of practical business world. And so those kind of hands-on things, hands-on now, are I think a great way to learn. General Assembly has great courses and is a pretty great way to get a survey like of understanding of how things work. There are great listservs that are out there that like you can find a mentor on. But I really like the community projects that happen. There are lots of things that, are like, this municipality wants to improve voting, and we're looking for a group of people who can help us. And like that feels that is a good transition to seeing like how things work, getting to work with other experts in the field. So I think that's right now like my favorite way to make that transition. It's like any career, transition. You just got to find the right opportunity. But like for getting an understanding of how things are working, I think that's a good way.
Yeah, that makes sense. I love the idea of being able to find something outside of what you're normally working on and being able to apply it to the community.
Yeah.
So, maybe it's volunteering, but being able to bridge the experience from what you're working on day to day in your career and where you want it to go, and being able to take that community approach, even if it's work related.
Totally. Yeah. That's it. It's a cool way, and lots of people are doing it more and more. So, and it's they're generous collaborators. Like they're very open to having people and then sharing their wisdom. So I highly recommend taking advantage of those.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you again so much for joining us. I love these takeaways that we came up with, that you shared. So I hope that everyone on the call was able to walk away with something. And I really look forward to being able to chat again and have more AMAs in the future. Thank you, Beth.
Thank you so much, Reese. This was super fun. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Cheers.